regular yoga classes, we come across Chaturanga a lot in our sun salutations from plank, moving down into that pose, and it's fraught with some difficulty for many of your students. Today I'd like to take a look at how you can minimize some of the bad alignment or misalignment in that pose while increasing their awareness, your students' awareness of exactly how to go about putting this pose into their daily repertoire without causing any injuries. A lot of times, students who do not have the strength for this pose simply don't know what it feels like to actually be in the pose. So one thing that's nice to do is to break down this pose once in a while in your classes, and I'd like to show you exactly how to do that. Helping your students feel the alignment of Chaturanga without all the strength is a difficult situation. But one easy way of going about it that I've found is to use a regular 4-inch block like this. And what you'll want to do is use this as a support, and it's going to go right across the pelvic floor to actually lift and hold the torso in alignment so that you can explain what's going on for them in their shoulders and the rest of their body without having to hold themselves up. So you'll want to play around a little bit with the positioning of this at the pelvic floor. So coming into it with your students, you'll ask them to come into plank pose, and then from plank pose, they're going to push their toes forward, bend their elbows, and rest their top of their thighs and their pelvic floor onto the block. And from here, you can talk a lot about their alignment without them getting fatigued. So, for instance, you can talk about where their forearms should be. It should be almost vertical, straight up and down. And as you can tell, right now, I'm not exactly in that position. And what I often do is I have my students say, look at your partner next to you or your mat mate and tell them, are their forearms vertical or not? And oftentimes they're not. So you just say, no problem. Come right back up onto your hands and knees and move your hands in an inch or two closer towards your knees, and then come right back up into your plank pose, push forward, and come back down. And now you'll see that my forearms are a lot more in that vertical position. So from here, you can talk about how easy it is for the shoulders to collapse, and that they must remain up away from the floor, and they have to pull their belly button up off the floor. So all this good alignment that you can talk about, ribs moving up, tailbone down, head of the arm bones lifted, you can work through this quite a bit while they're supported in this pose. You're going to find that your students are going to enjoy working with Chaturanga like that because most of the time they're so doggone tired they cannot figure out what the alignment is no matter how many times you ask them to lift their arm bones up off the floor. I'm going to show you another way that you can help your students find this good alignment while they're working toward getting toward the full pose. Maybe their strength is just not quite there yet, and here's a couple of things that you can do. Oftentimes in our sun salutations, when a student's in plank pose, we give them the offering. If you need to, place your knees on the floor before coming down into Chaturanga. I'd like to explore that a little bit more deeply and show you just another way that you can improve on that to help your students gain even more self-awareness of where they're supposed to be in that pose, as well as develop the appropriate strengths. So let's say we're in that plank pose and you're about to come down, and that's usually what you say. If you need to, bring your knees down, right? Well, here's what I'm going to add to that, or ask you to give this a try. Bring the knees down, lift the feet, and cross the ankles. What does this do? It gives them more muscle power for one, and it gives them the ability as a lever to pull back a little bit, to tuck their tailbone down in order for them to get their ribs lifted. And once they have that solid, then they can come down more in that same alignment that they're going to need to for Chaturanga. Then, of course, they just stretch their legs out and come up into their cobra or upward facing dog. So what you'll find is that they're going to have the alignment from the tailbone all the way up to the shoulders a lot more readily with their feet crossed, acting as a lever to help lift up and work the core more, which, as you know, they need quite a lot of in their Chaturanga. Okay, so another way to move forward in their Chaturanga, that is for students that do not have quite enough strength. And then there's a couple of ways to build up toward the full pose that I'd like to show you. One looks like this. In their plank pose, have them separate their feet as wide as the sticky mat. So now they have more of their weight coming out to the side and less in the torso. And as they come down into Chaturanga, it's going to be a lot easier for them to hold that pose. And then they come forward up into whatever pose, up dog or cobra. So just separating the feet like that is going to give them more leverage and less weight to come down into their Chaturanga. So try that, separating the feet for some of your students who are moving toward Chaturanga, but are not just quite there and can't hold it in good alignment. Another way that you can help your students work and build toward Chaturanga is to have them actually lift a leg. This lifting up the leg helps lessen the load of coming down into Chaturanga because they have that leg acting not only as a lever, but actually physically lifting up and helping to lift the torso. So that would look like something like this. So they're in their plank pose, and they would lift a leg up. So automatically, there's a lightening of the load, and then they're going to come down into Chaturanga and all the way back up. So that's another way of your students to work toward coming down into the full pose. They're going to build up strength, they're going to keep in good alignment, and they're going to have some fun. Sometimes your students just don't have the idea of what it's going to feel like to come down from plank into Chaturanga. And just like with the block, there's another way that you might have some fun helping your students feel that good alignment, but this is going to actually ask them to work a little bit more than using the block. So I'm going to show you that. So what you're going to need is a strap with a firm loop that you can place just below your elbows. And your hands will be just slightly wider apart than shoulder width. What this is going to do when you bend your elbows is it's going to come into your body and act like the block and holding you up. But now the center of gravity is not at the hips here, but it's going to be more at the chest and upper body. And so it's going to require that your students actually hold themselves up with a little bit more strength than what was necessary with the block. So this would be the second step you would do in addition to the block. Okay, so basically what you'll be doing is coming up into your plank pose and then pushing forward, bending the elbows, coming in it just like you would with Chaturanga, but look, I've got a little sling here, a Chaturanga hammock, if you will. It's still going to require some strength to hold, but I have got a little help here with my strap. It might take a little while for your students to adjust this. Sometimes having it slightly above the elbows is more helpful because it's going to actually give them more stability. So having it above the elbows, coming into it, coming forward, and down. So you'll notice I'm going to be up a lot higher in this position, and it's a lot easier to hold for them. So you can play with this with your students, helping them come into alignment with Chaturanga and building up to the strength with just a little help from their Chaturanga hammock.